This is TWiT.
Exciting news, right? We talked about the 8th generation core Intel processors coming out. We talked about them not exactly being 8th generation if you're in terms of architecture. That Intel says if you make the processors, you can name them whatever delete expletive generation they want to because they are making the processors and they claim they're 40% faster, which if you're using multi-threaded devices should be the truth, not that we can test it until they ship. So, bringing everybody up to speed on 8th-core processors, let's talk about some of the announcements. One of our favorites, quad-core XPS 13, which is going to be available with all of the other 8th-generation devices in September of this year. And essentially, it's the ever-so-delightful quad-core XPS, the XPS 13 that I've been carrying for the last year, but with a quad-core 8th-gen Copy Lake processor, which means things I like to do, like running video rendering tools, will suddenly be significantly faster because the number of threads and cores available to them on the processor will be doubled. I like this. I'm also very curious to see what the battery life impact is like, although we are assured battery life will not go down.
Yeah, if you go to their website, they still quote the same 22 hours of battery life for the 1080p model and 12 hours for the QHD Plus model, which, first of all, I didn't realize there was that huge of a gap between the two different models of XPS 13. That's like a dramatic difference. Even if we know we're never actually going to see 22 hours out of either one of them, the relative difference between them is substantial. Those 22 and 12 numbers match the performance listed of the dual-core Kaby Lake 7th gen Dell XPS 13 machines. So in theory, based on Dell's metrics, there would be no degradation in performance or degradation in battery life when doing the normal battery life tests, right? If you're going to utilize those threads and cores more heavily, depending on your workload, you may see a decrease there, but doesn't look like there's any other changes. Like, this is very simply a processor swap. The design is the same. Looks like the battery is the same. Screen resolution options are the same. So nothing, no big changes there. Although, what I'm really curious about is what the pricing may do with this, right? So Intel is, they show pricing on their ARC website, which is kind of their specification website. And the pricing on these solutions is only like $20 more than the dual core parts. That being said, the way Intel's working with OEMs like Dell, HP, Lenovo, these giant entities, what they're probably trying to do is get some of their flagship products out, like the XPS 13, XPS 15 from Dell, the Spectre from HP, the Lenovo X1 series. They want to get those quad-core parts in there like quickly and affordably. So it wouldn't surprise me if you kind of only see these quad-core derivatives and these kind of flagship components, and you don't, like, we're not going to see a universal replacement of Kaby Lake dual-core Core i7, Core i5s with quad-core Kaby Lake refresh Core i7s and Core i5s. That would be my guess, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense in a lot of the price performance categories, and most of the people, especially at the low end, aren't going to see a whole huge difference, I think, in their everyday use. Not to drift off, but there. Another one that came out from Dell this week, because we have some other. We'll talk about this one in a minute or two. We should talk about IFA 2017. Acer announced the passively cooled Switch 7 Black Edition. And
so this also uses the quad core variants. It's less a clamshell notebook and more like a Surface design where it's got a kickstand and it's kind of got the fold-up keyboard behind it. The kickstand's a little bit more interesting, and then it has like a hands-free engage method where you just kind of push down on the bottom of the tablet and it pops open the kickstand behind it. So in theory, you could open it up with one hand. It's a little bit less cumbersome. The fingerprint reader is actually in the bezel of the tablet itself. So you don't have you still get access to it if you don't have the keyboard attached, which is kind of nice. And apparently they have a capability where if the machine is off and you do your fingerprint over the fingerprint sensor on the bezel, it will both turn on the machine and unlock it when it boots up. Like it is registering the fingerprint acknowledgement and verification even before you get to the Windows login screen, which is just a nice thing, right? It just speeds things up a little bit, and it kind of gets the process moving a little bit easier. But the passive cooling on this is even kind of, it almost seems not possible to me, being that you have a 15-watt CPU, and this even has a 20-watt discrete GPU, the MX150, GeForce MX150, which is a very low-end discrete GPU, better than integrated graphics, obviously. But not by a huge amount, right? So this, I think it's got 384 CUDA cores, and I don't know what the clock speeds exactly are, but it's using a dual heat pipe system, which they brand as like liquid cool, or what do they call it? Liquid loop or something like that. It don't feel like it's anything technologically more advanced than we've seen in the past. It is heat pipes. It's larger heat pipes, and two of them kind of connecting through. But if it can, the question for me on this is there, say you compare it to that Dell XPS 13 with the same quad-core 15-watt parts we just talked about, is this machine going to be able to run at higher clocks for as long as the Dell system? And my guess would be no, that there's some kind of, there has to be a sacrifice of some kind moving away from active cooling to a completely passive cooling design, and still a very thin, compact tablet system. But now keep in mind, like the XPS 13 has, the display is separate from the computing hardware, so there's there's separation of heat a little bit there, and so but for this Acer, the Switch 7 Black Edition, it's all in one place, right? So there's even more heat kind of in this same physical space than there is on the Dell. So I'm very curious to get my hands on with it and see if we notice any long-term performance deltas between it and stuff like the Dell or HP or whatever else anybody else puts out. It's still a really nice looking device. I've never seen one or used one in person, but impressive design.
They look lovely. I mean, I think the big question is you've nailed it. Is if I fire up, my favorite video rendering tool, if I, get Handbrake going, and Handbrake will run all of the cores as hard as it can, and that's it's a little more practical than using say a burn-in tool for a processor that maxes out the cores. But you'll very, very quickly find out how fast those cores are running and how fast they can run at a sustained full throttle volume. Is it a typical user scenario? Probably not, but it also amazes me that once you get like 30 or 40 tabs in Chrome, or goodness help you, Firefox, it's always amazing to see how much of your system resources and your CPU go away and your CPU utilization goes up. But that's going to be one of the big questions, and we'll see just exactly how good the design architecture is in terms of pulling away that heat. I mean, the fans on the current processors are not that loud, but they are still there, and I'm with you. I'll be very, very curious to see how those work out in the real world.